Bill, good afternoon. I hope you're well.
I'm doing well, Matt. It's always great to hear your voice. Challenging times, as you well know right now.
I am as frustrated as I've been in a long time with Washington, D.C. It has such little to do with your body of Congress in the Senate. It has a lot to do with the House of Representatives. I know that, it is not yours to necessarily comment on, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to offer us some words of solace. It does not seem like we're going to have leadership in the House in any near term. What can you say about it? What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I think we need to get this sorted out much sooner than later. I want to be respectful of the other body, but to the extent that they don't have order in the House, it just feeds right into Chuck Schumer's strategy to create chaos over in the Senate. And what this will do is it just continues to burn off the amount of time that we have to move through our appropriations bill. We're going to have, another emergency situation with respect to our budget and shutting the government down. We're operating under a continuing resolution right now. I think we have 29 days before the government shuts down, and Schumer just released the Senate for another several days. He took a 10-day hiatus to go over and kiss Xi Jinping's ring, and now he's doing this, and he basically says, well, nothing's coming out of the House anyway. So it certainly is playing to Chuck Schumer's advantage while this is going on. So I encourage my friends in the House to get to get their decisions made and to move as expeditiously as they can to get back into some sense of normalcy here.
Let's and I agree with you wholeheartedly, and hopefully that is done sooner rather than later, because if it's not, it ultimately leads us to the question of whether or not we have to deal with yet another omnibus spending package from the halls of Congress. Are you fearful that that's what we're going to deal with, as opposed to these 12 separate appropriations bills being considered singularly?
Matt, you know how this works. With 12 separate bills, that gives each of our colleagues the opportunity to amend it, to improve it, to fully vet it by going through the process. The omnibus package is something that Chuck Schumer cooks up, in a basement somewhere. This is the ultimate smoke-filled room. You wind up not knowing what's in it until 18 hours before you have to vote, 20 hours before you have to vote, some very short timeline. Have you seen this movie before, Matt? They'll drop a 4,000-page bill on us. You got to vote up or down whether to keep the government open or choke it down. You don't even know what you're voting for. It's malpractice, but it's the way that it's the way that things seem to work up here, because it concentrates all the power in Chuck Schumer's hands.
So let's shift our attention to foreign policy matters. I know that you've been very forceful in your conversations with a variety of different national hosts regarding Iran and how you believe they are pulling the strings when it comes to Hamas. And I'm fearful that when we begin opening up money, even in the spirit of humanitarian aid to Gaza, that's ultimately money that will go back to foreign entities that want to do harm to our allies and harm to the United States of America. We saw that with the $6 billion that Joe Biden now claims hasn't been touched. Who knows if that's the case? It's in Qatar. Tell me about your fears regarding, quote-unquote, humanitarian aid going to countries that might allow it to go to entities that want to do us harm.
Well, Matt, I'll touch on the humanitarian aid piece very quickly. Then I want to come back to the funding of all of this. The humanitarian aid piece, I think, is Joe Biden's effort to appease the radical left in his party. I mean, these are the same people that are protesting in these major cities, on college campuses, protesting on behalf of Hamas. They're pro-terrorist protesters that are driving the left wing of his party. The hypocrisy here is unbelievable. And so he's throwing a bone to them, trying to get them off of his back so he can also be supportive of Israel. He's trying to play it both ways. I saw a headline saying Joe Biden is walking a thin line. There shouldn't be any question about this. Joe Biden should be 120% behind Israel. And nobody should be unclear about the fact that Hamas is a terrorist organization who, in their very charter, wants to destroy Jewish people and wipe the country of Israel off the face of the earth. Back to the larger funding question. There's been a lot of focus on the $6 billion. This is the ransom payment that Joe Biden agreed to get 5 American hostages. They had already agreed to trade 5 Iranian prisoners for 5 Americans. They added on top of it $6 billion to boot. That's $1.2 billion per American. That put a price on every one of our heads, Matt. That is inherently dangerous. Plus, he's giving those funds to the world's greatest sponsor of terror, that's Iran. But that's only the tip of the iceberg. That's just $6 billion. If you look back to what happened when Joe Biden came into office, and you know I worked in the Trump administration, worked very hard to cut Iran's funding down to a trickle. We practically cut Iran off. My job was to get the Japanese government to stop buying Iranian crude. We did that all over the world. We brought Iran's fund flow to almost a halt. It was widely publicized then that Hamas and Hezbollah were going broke. Joe Biden comes into office in 2021. They stop enforcing the sanctions. They allow Iran to sell its oil on the world markets. And guess what happens? It's like a hockey stick in terms of their revenues going up. We had the 11-day war coming out of Gaza into Israel. You remember that? That was 2021 under Joe Biden. And now we have this. Joe Biden is allowing and facilitating the flow of funds to Iran. Our estimates are as high as $80 billion of illicit oil sales that Iran has been able to benefit from. We know about the $10 billion that he allowed Iraq to pay Iran earlier this year. They have been doing everything they can to get money to Iran, and they act like they're surprised when Iran turns around and funds more terror with it. It's unbelievable.
Talk to me about what this has to do with your questions regarding Jacob Lew and his nomination as ambassador for Israel. You know a little bit about these nominations as you were ambassador to Japan under Donald Trump's administration. This seems like a key nomination at a time of great unrest in the Middle East. Tell us a little more about Jacob Lew.
Well, he had a very critical role in the original fatally flawed Iran deal, the JCPOA, as it was called under President Obama. And he was part of the disinformation campaign, going around and telling the American public that it would allow immediate, intrusive evaluations of Iran's nuclear program. That was absolutely untrue. He said that it would not allow Iran to get the path to a nuclear weapon. We know that was untrue. The Israelis proved that with a very daring raid. Iran never gave up on their program. And he had, there's a detailed congressional report where they found out that he actually lied to Congress about the Iran deal. Now think about it. Iran is the sworn enemy of Israel. They want to see Israel wiped off the face of the planet. Lew is a sympathizer for Iran. He's somebody that's helped enrich Iran. I actually showed the charts showing the enrichment. The fact that maximum pressure under Trump worked. We squeezed out their fund flow. We stopped everything going to Iran. And then the fact that it had dramatically taken off under Biden, I asked him to defend that policy because as the chief of that mission, as the head of that mission to Israel, his responsibility is the safety and the lives of Americans. Well, we had 30 Americans killed by Iran and Hamas. We've got now a dozen of them that are held hostage. Is he going to continue supporting the funds flow from Iran to Hamas? Is he going to continue to support the Biden administration policies that are going light on Iran, that are allowing these sanctions to be evaded? Or is he going to stand up for the safety of the Americans that he's responsible for? Well, I can tell you it was clear to me he's not going to stand up to the Biden administration. He's going to continue to allow them to pursue this flawed policy regarding Iran. He's going to make Americans less safe, and he's going to make Israelis less safe as a result.
Well, and I think, and Senator Bill Hagerty, our guest right now, I think you've made mention of this directly, Senator, that even beyond the Iran to Hamas connection by unfreezing this money, this administration has given money more directly to Hamas in the spirit of quote unquote Palestinian relief. Is that not the case? I think you mentioned the $30 million that went to these relief groups. Any money that goes into Gaza is going to find its way to Hamas, is it not?
That's true, because Hamas is the elected leadership of the Gazan people. They control the flow. I put forward legislation, of course, the Democrats have blocked it twice already, to repurpose the funds that we were sending to Gaza, the quote humanitarian aid, into replenishing Iron Dome after the 11-day war. The Democrats don't want to address this. They want to just believe this fantasy that they're able to somehow scratch this humanitarian itch. When you look at what Hamas will do, they keep their own citizens as human shields. You saw the picture of the leaders of Hamas in five-star hotels in Qatar, while the Israeli government, the Israeli Defense Force, is asking civilians to leave Gaza. They're sitting back in their five-star hotels telling them not to leave. They want to use them as human shields. They want the gore and the carnage to use in their disinformation campaign that they'll then use to put pressure on Israel.
Well, and I'm just a simple guy with a microphone sitting in Nashville, Tennessee, Senator, so I'm trying to understand how we distinguish between people who are pro-Palestinian and people who are pro-Hamas when, as you note, since 2006, Hamas has been the elected government. They beat out the Palestinian Authority to become the elected, quote-unquote, government of Gaza. And instead of spending money on their own people, obviously they're spending money waging war against their sworn enemy, the state of Israel, and the Jewish people. So how do we distinguish between, I mean, one would think if it made any sense, the Palestinians, if, like we are being told, they don't like Hamas any more than we do, then why are they not looking at the IDF as liberators?
I would hope that would be the case. I think everybody knows this is true. The American people are not against the Palestinian people. I don't think the Israeli people are. What it is a terrorist group that's taking control, and Hamas. This is a similar situation with the Chinese Communist Party and the way they rule the Chinese people. We're not against the Chinese people, but we certainly are deeply concerned about our adversaries in the Chinese Communist Party. I think the real problem here, though, is that when Hamas's numbers start going down, which they had been, they launch an attack, they become more popular. I don't understand this. I don't understand the psychology that supports this. But they become even more popular amongst the populace. And what they're doing is they're endangering Palestinian people. They're demonstrating the fact that they do not care about the safety and well-being of the civilians that they're charged with leading. And to see them sitting in their five-star hotels in another country, sending out orders like this, while their kids are driving around, as I understand it, in Maseratis in Doha, and their people are being used as a human shield in Gaza City. It's just unconscionable. I can't explain the politics of it.
Senator, finally, last question from me. I look at it as there are three different ways when we say that we support Israel, that we as a nation can support Israel. One would be militarily, and that would be literally sending troops, boots on the ground, that sort of thing. Number two, monetarily and materially. And number three, using our executive branch of government and our commander-in-chief as a way to indicate to the rest of the nations in the Middle East to stay out of the conflict and allow Israel to respond to the war initiated by Hamas and to rid the world of that terrorist organization. Sadly, I don't know if we have a commander-in-chief that has the ability to do that, especially considering what happened over the last 24 hours with regard to him in the Middle East. Can you speak to where you are on those three options? And were you, for example, Commander-in-Chief, what message you would be sending to other nations in the Middle East?
Well, Matt, as always, you're extremely articulate about matters like this, and you are exactly right. And were I in that position, what I would do is I would make certain that I'm aligning my military deterrence with my diplomatic and my economic messages as well. That's not happening. This administration is sending mixed messages. They sent an aircraft carrier strike group to the Eastern Mediterranean. The aim of that was to dissuade Hamas's other allies like Hezbollah or any other nation that might want to get involved not to get involved.
Right.
That wasn't enough. Now they've sent a second aircraft carrier strike group into the region. The problem is that this White House sends mixed messages. The first message that came from the Biden State Department was that Israel should not retaliate. That came from the Office of Palestinian Affairs, which in my view shouldn't exist in the State Department. Be that as it may, that was the first official communique from this administration. The second communique was a tweet by our Secretary of State saying that he was working with Turkish leadership to try to get a ceasefire in place. This is before Israel could even count its dead. They're calling for a ceasefire. It took 48 hours. Finally, Joe Biden comes forward and actually acknowledges Israel's right to defend itself. When Biden flies over, instead of calling out the root cause of this, which is Iran, he doesn't mention Iran at all. He goes over there for, I guess, a photo opportunity without even getting at the root cause and without doing anything to stop the flow of funds to Iran, who is behind all of this. So we've got to get our messaging aligned. He should be talking about who did this. We should be snapping back every sanction we possibly could. Instead, what happened yesterday, Matt, you will not believe this. Yesterday was the final day that we had to extend the sanctions on Iran that Biden has been overlooking. These were the sanctions that were at the United Nations Security Council that could have been extended until yesterday. They let that opportunity expire. They put out some very puny primary sanctions that have really little effect against Hamas, and they let the big sanctions that we could have snapped back and really used to stop the flow of weapons and drones from Iran, they let those expire. It's just a mixed message every time you deal with the administration. That's why we're having such tremendous disruption around the globe under Biden.
Thank you for being a sensible and stable voice from Tennessee in Washington, D.C., Senator, and I appreciate your regular availability to speak to your constituents back home. Thank you.